I just love imagining, 6,000 years ago, the ancestor of all of these diverse brassica oleracea, the broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, all of that, like what that common ancestor they all share that had super leathery leaves that loved and still does love to grow on the salty cliffs of Italy, and that it was vaguely edible.
Welcome to episode 69 of the Seed Farmer Podcast, the podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support-podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Tournesol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. And today's seed conversation is about the magic of sharing seeds. But first, news. Back in episode 50, I talked to you about how we grew some birdhouse gourds at Tournesol, and then I just let them sit around for almost 2 years before cleaning them. Just kind of ignored them. And then we cleaned them, and the seed germinated. It was great, and we shipped it, and people have been enjoying it. But I'd also left a few gourds intact. This spring, I drilled, 2-inch holes into them, maybe 2.5-inch holes, into these intact ones that I'd left, hollowed them out, and removed all the seeds, and I cleaned those seeds, and now those seeds are in seed packs. You get that part. So I made a birdhouse out of the birdhouse gourd, and I did that by drilling that hole, and I made a couple holes on the bottom, just drilled them with a little bit, maybe a 1/4-inch bit for drainage, and then some holes in the top, and then I put some twine, and I tied them in an oak tree. And it was really fun to do, and it was really fun to hang up in the tree, and then we just watched it. And I didn't expect much of it other than it was there, and whenever a bird would go close to it, my daughter would tell me there's a robin beside it, and that was fun. But last weekend, a pair of tree swallows moved into the gourd. So I saw them checking it out. Then I saw them gathering some twigs. And now there's a gourd full of a twig nest or little bit nest and a mama swallow sitting there with her head out the window. So I wasn't expecting this at all. Needless to say, I love birdhouse gourds now, and I am very disappointed I'm not growing any this season. I can't wait to next year to grow so many, and we're going to have birdhouses all over the place. And hopefully those houses will get filled with tree swallows. So more on that next year. And in other news, we have started a podcast at Tournesol Farm. So this podcast is called Le Goût du Jardin. So it's French, and that means a taste of the garden. So we started this podcast. Well, episode 11 is coming out this week. We're 3 months in, and it's been really fun to do this. Now, I'm co-hosting this with 2 of my co-farmers, Fred Theriault, who you might remember from such great classics like Crop Planning for Organic Vegetable Growers, that book I wrote a couple years ago, maybe 10, 15, 16 years ago now. So Fred and I wrote a book 16 years ago. He's my co-farmer and co-host now. And then Sophie Descoteaux is my other co-host. She's the person who wrote the theme music to the Seed Farmer podcast. So the 3 of us are the hosts for this show. Sophie and Fred alternate hosting the first half of the show, and they talk about, growing tips and kitchen tips. And I do the second half of the show, and every episode I tell a seed story. So this is a deep dive into one of the varieties that we carry in our seed catalog. And I talk about how to use it in the kitchen or however you might use it. And then I talk a bit about how to grow it, and then some history of where the crop comes from, breeding notes if there's any of that kind of stuff. And then I wrap up with some tips on how to harvest seed from the crop in case the listener wants to grow their own seed. So one more reminder that it is in French. So this is a great chance to listen to more French media and practice your French gardening vocabulary. There's a link to the podcast in the show notes, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And now, let's get into today's conversation. Petra Page-Mann is this episode's guest. Petra stewards Fruition Community Seed Farm with Matthew Goldfarb in the Finger Lakes region of New York. Petra's seed journey began at a young age in her father's garden, harvesting seeds and packing them into homemade seed packets to then share with others. This early love for the magic of sharing seeds eventually led to founding Fruition. In this episode, Petra shares the evolution of Fruition from a commercial regional seed company to a 20-acre community seed farm. We discussed the structural pivot away from running a commercial online business toward a non-commercial gift economy model. Petra shares how they use interactive community storytelling, theater, and seed feasts to move past simple transaction-based seed swaps and cultivate collaborative relational seed stewardship instead. In the deep dive, Petra and I get into 2 seed crops. First, we talk about breeding the Dulcinea carrot for uniformity and reliability on a market farm. Then, we talk about crossing collards and cabbage to develop Mermaid's Aurora, a gorgeous gene pool of tender greens with kaleidoscope diversity. We also get into the technical seed production of each crop, growing second-year carrots in high tunnels, harvesting seed umbels by hand, and how to thresh carrot seeds. For the brassica cross, we talk about how they harvest first-year plants, how the carrots overwinter in a root cellar, and of course, how Fruition cleans the seeds. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, Petra. Welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Oh, Dan, such a pleasure. Thank you.
So this isn't quite the same thing as hanging out in person, but I think we can still catch up and have a good time.
This is such a pleasure, Dan.
So why don't we start with your seed story? How did your interest in seeds get sparked?
I have my father to thank. I grew up in my father's garden here in the Finger Lakes in Western New York, and I didn't think much of saving seeds, just like I didn't think much of sowing seeds, just like I didn't think much. It was just our normal lives to brush our teeth and ride our bicycles. And, we would sow a few seeds. So we'd save a few seeds because we're going to sow a few seeds next year. And I'll forever be thankful that incredibly common cycle of life that is incredibly uncommon in our culture now was part of my youngest life. Even though I thought it was very commonplace and not anything unusual, I was quite enamored with them. And specifically, I liked having them in my pockets. And I really liked making envelopes out of the glossy pages of National Geographic magazines and just having them in my pockets because you never know when you get to say, "Happy birthday" with marigolds. And I also would love to share a little snippet of a day my family was checking out of the grocery store, and I'm in middle school, and I have a packet of home saved marigold seeds in my pocket. And the cashier had this long face after a long day, long week, long life. I don't know, but I was like, I took a chance and I put my hand in my pocket and I handed her, I asked, "Would you like a packet of marigolds?" And she said, "Yes." And suddenly she was smiling and we all were laughing. And I don't know what this magic of seeds is, but I just know that I will devote my life to them. So yeah, I spent a number of years working on other people's seed farms, and just so grateful to have that, really early memory of saving seeds. Like we saved tomato seeds in my father's garden. We did not ferment them, right? I thought it was so normal when I was little that, yeah, we're going to get 20-30% germination. Whatever. We save plenty of tomato seeds because tomatoes have plenty of seeds in them. And that's just what we do. So, it's been a delightful journey of, yeah, this falling in love without it, but in a very such a commonplace, we're breathing air right now kind of way. And so grateful for the, professional seed growers that have, really up-leveled my understanding of seed saving and at scale and in quality and quantity. And it's been such a journey.
Now, when I met you I think it was in 2012 at the Eastern Canadian Organic Seed Growers Network.
That's right.
You and Matthew drove up from New York, and I think Owen from Annapolis Seeds had told you this was happening, and you popped up. And I remember meeting both of you. So you didn't have a seed company. You were just really into seeds. And it's really exciting to meet folks who are into that. And you had big ideas and big ambitions. And I thought, well, we'll see what happens. And when you launched Fruition, I never thought it would take off like it did. Like you launched a Kickstarter and you just jumped into it, and suddenly you went from like 0 to 100 in like a season or two, and it was really impressive. And I've watched your seed company, your seed business, your seed world kind of just like evolve over the, I guess, subsequent 14 years. Yeah, I guess that's the math. And now Fruition lives in a different place. So do you want to just tell us about what you started as Fruition and how it's changed over this period of time and where it is now?
Let me paint you a picture, which is all to say, there will be lines. Feel free to read in between them. I would love to share the rest of the story and the rest of our lives in greater detail, but here's just a vignette. So Petra, picture tiny Petra, like marigolds in her pocket, shoving them in the ways of cashiers at grocery stores in middle school. Like, Petra gifted hundreds of packets of seeds without even thinking about it that way when Petra, who's speaking in third person, was a little girl. And fast forward, and I dreamed for 7 years about starting a small scale seed company focused on regional adaptation before starting Fruition. I like to say, other women have biological clocks in their uterus. Mine was in my heart. It's called Fruition. And it was honestly a really profound, we could call it an existential crisis of starting Fruition and starting a seed business, a company. And I like to think of seed company as in like, do you like to keep company with your friends, Dan? I like to keep company with seeds. And so I dreamed about this small scale, regionally focused seed company. And then when I realized I had to sell seeds, I was like, oh, geez, this is awful. Like, my mother definitely didn't charge me for breast milk. And I haven't gotten the invoice from the son yet. I don't know about you. And like, we live in a world full of gifts. And I have a different analysis now. But at the time, it was just really awkward and disconcerting. And I also knew I didn't want to get another job. And so I decided to try my hand at selling seeds. And turns out that was an energizing paradox. You know, Rowan White many years ago said this phrase, and it brings me to tears every time. Of 150 years ago, seed companies didn't exist. If we do our work well, 150 years from now, they won't need to exist. And that's always hit me deep in my heart, deep in my gut, deep in my soul. And I didn't know how else to survive in this world, and I still don't. I don't know if survival is the point, actually, but I digress. We sold seeds very joyfully for about 8 years within that paradox. And then I thought I was getting burned out. Matthew was too, my beloved partner, Matthew. And so we did the things that you do when you think you're burned out. For 18 months, we've redesigned Fruition so that he could take a year-long sabbatical, I could take a 6-month sabbatical, and truly just step back. So, yeah, 2 years ago, we committed to no longer selling seeds, but abstaining from selling seeds and really wanting to focus on seeds as a gift, and that this world is full of gifts. And in a world where we've normalized non sharing, what does it look like to normalize sharing? We give and receive. We have different needs and different gifts at every stage in our lives. And what does it look to trust the long game of interconnection, interdependence, reciprocity, and not even trying to pretend that we can be even with the earth? So, it is, 14 years ago when we founded Fruition, I definitely thought, what could go wrong? I'm growing seeds that I love on land that I love for people that I love. What could go wrong? And nothing went wrong. We just changed. And so I love imagining what I'm going to be saying, thinking, and acting 14 hours from now, 14 years from now. And I can imagine the ways that I'll look back and say, oh, wow, I was so naive. And look what I did and how beautiful.
Thanks for walking us through that, the different waves of your relationship with Fruition. Can you tell us sort of practically what Fruition looks like now. So now it's called Fruition Community Seed Farm. And what is that practically these days?
Practically, that looks like we still have the 20 acres that we are very fortunate to steward. There's 4 active acres of seed being grown this year of, dozens of different species. And part of the practice of not commodifying seed life is not commodifying our labor and love on the land. And so instead of, like, for example, we're a very successful seed company, and we were able to purchase a seed packing machine. And we actually don't have that seed packing machine anymore. And we're packing seeds by hand for us, by us, within community. And it's a really beautiful, expansively meditative, connective, relational practice. And same with the seeds, like a lot of our seed cleaning equipment that was kind of that mid scale. Did you ever see the blue dragon, Dan?
I don't know if I've seen the blue dragon. Tell me about it.
Imagine a creature that you can throw a watermelon a second into, and it offers you all of these seeds. You can grow acres of watermelon, and within an hour, is so perfectly clean seed. And so that machine was a great gift in our lives.
For those who are listening, just to make sure they understand, you're talking about a cucurbit crusher.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it was blue and powerful.
Is it so obvious? I love you, Dan. And so we chose to move that seed packing machine and some of our larger scale, which is still so thoroughly like small scale, mid small scale seed cleaning, commercial seed cleaning equipment, because now we're wanting to center relationship and relational connection over just the unilateral financial profit being the underlying motive.
Before I ask you another question, I'll tell you, I visited that seed packing machine at Sebastian Aguilar's over the winter. It was really fun to see it there.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
So nowadays, my understanding is that you have a lot of volunteers that come to the farm to help you with the harvest, the packing, and the different parts of running the farm. Was that true?
Yes, there are people that come and are of service, are looking to serve future generations more than ourselves or even each other here in the present. And so we haven't honestly found the word. We call our work parties becoming good soil together. I struggle to say anything in concrete ways. Maybe there's more generous ways to say it too. But yeah, exploring what it's like to be in reciprocity and ongoing relational gift, like giving and receiving without keeping tracks of ledgers.
And maybe the last part about talking about the community seed farm is in the past, folks could just order seeds on your website and then they'd get shipped to them in a little mailer. These days, you've moved away from that. You've moved away from kind of having like a dollar price on the packs. I mean, that's a big piece in this transition. And now you're working in a gift economy, but people still can get seeds from you. Can you kind of flesh that out, what that looks like, that transaction?
That transaction, absolutely. Economic language is at the core. It's so interesting to see it's everywhere. I honestly struggle a little bit to describe what it is that we do, Dan, and I'll try. I like to say our seeds are more expensive than ever because you have to feel your feelings. This thing happens in market economies when something becomes zero market dollars, that it becomes free. And the gift is not free, as Robin Wall Kimmerer and so many Indigenous grandmothers remind us, that the gift comes with a twofold, joyful responsibility, obligation to say thank you, and also to keep the gift moving and to not hoard, but to continue to give as expansively as we receive, which is really hard to actually keep up with, given the fact that the sun keeps shining every day. And so we offer seeds in very embodied practices, these 2-hour experiences. I struggle to find language for what they are. And I like, when you go to the theater, when you go sit down to see a movie or go to see a play, you don't know what's going to unfold. And that's honestly a lot of the magic. The transformation is in the mystery and the reenactment of things that are familiar and different, helping you feel more human and alive. Through comfort and discomfort. And so we share these 2-hour immersive, interactive, highly participatory. We laugh, we cry. There are songs we sing, games we play, lots of stories. There are puppets involved. There's basically 45 minutes of exploring what it's like to live inside this world, and then a market economy, and then remembering the world as a gift. And then we share the seed feast, which is just imagine a dozen tables, sometimes less, sometimes more, covered in thousands of packets of seed, hundreds of different varieties, all mixed together. It's not like, here's your tomatoes, here's your broccoli. It's like everything is mixed up with everything. And that diversity is part of the practice. It's a huge practice. It's all a practice, not because we have answers. We just have lots of seeds, and we're playing with how we remember and reimagine how to be sharing together, and we're keeping each other in mind and the world beyond transaction. And so, yeah, the seed feast is this wonderful, where like a seed swap is generally a seed buffet. And then there's a grocery store where you bring your list and can I check things of what my own, my precious, what I want. We're hoping to germinate beyond that hard seed coat of ways of us and them, and this seed buffet vibe where I'm just like gonna fill my plate with as much seed as I possibly can here at the seed buffet, because the market value is zero. And I don't have to think about anyone who came before me or anyone who came after me. In a market economy, when you give as little as you can and you get as much as you can, you're winning. And I love a buffet, don't get me wrong. I just don't know if that leaves a lot of places for our great grandchildren or even our neighbors down the road who are hungry. And so I digress. The seed feast is this epic experience of, I share a story and then a prompt. For example, what will you receive as a gift for the pollinators? And then looking and down at the tables, and what will you receive as one packet of seed, one bite at a time, one seed packet at a time at the seed feast? What is that one packet that you'll receive as a gift for the pollinators? And resisting taking it for ourselves. And that when you give gifts, maybe you receive things that you could never receive with a one-for-one valuation. I love talking about seeds too, but thank you for indulging me in talking about the gift of seed.
If you're already a seed farmer, or even just thinking about harvesting seed from your plants for the first time, head over to seedgrowers.farm for my free seed grower resources. There is cross-pollination information, seed yield information, even a few seed spreadsheets. There's also a list of my favorite seed books and podcasts. While you're there, you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter to get seed grower tips and stories straight into your inbox. So head to seedgrowers.farm for my seed grower resources. Now, back to the show. Well, so should we then deep dive into talking shop about seeds?
Yes.
Now, when I asked you what you wanted to talk about, you told me there were kind of like two stories that you wanted to talk about. And so why don't we start with the carrot story? Why do you want to talk about growing carrots for seed?
Well, they're just delicious. And they're such a great challenge, especially here in the Northeast. And we couldn't do it alone, and we do nothing alone. And I'll never forget the day that Nathaniel Thompson, our dear friend, he grows several dozen acres, biodynamic acres of vegetables, and he's really interested in seed too. And he grew, at the time he was growing about 5 acres of bolero carrot. And I'll never forget the moment that he asked Matthew and I, could we dehybridize bolero? And all the little voices, the different parts of me that were like, no, on any number of reasons. And yes, this is what the world needs. And so such a range of emotions, and realizing they're the seeds that I love to grow for me, but I love some of my favorite seeds that we've been in relationship are these needs that people that we love have come to us with their stories and their needs. And then it was really such a delight to be in conversation with our beloved friend, mentor, Erwin Goldman at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And, he has all of those beautiful open source, nonce style. And so knows so much about Bolero and so much about the nonce in general, genome, and ways that, and he was so generous. He offered to grow. And I think for 3 or 4 years, he grew a winter generation in his glass houses in Wisconsin, so that we were growing at Nathaniel's fields, like for like all of those agronomic qualities, all of those selection right on his farm, which PS has really rocky soil. and and then sending those stecklings to Irwin, and then just seeing every single generation, how it was evolving, and just tasting every single generation. And I had carrots with every variety. There's so much diversity, and selection is so important. And especially with carrots, they revert back to their bitter pine sol-esque ancestry so fast. So you we really need to taste every single root, which is just so fun and a little intense when there's like 800, 900 roots.
Were you actually dehybridizing Bolero in this project?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We were not. We had Bolero crossed with, are you familiar with the Aussie like nonce populations?
I'm familiar with Aussie. I don't know about the nonce population. So why don't you tell us about them?
Yeah. So Irwin was part of the foundation of Aussie.
I feel like I should also just step in and say Aussie is the open source seed initiative, and it has been mentioned on other podcasts. For anybody just jumping in who doesn't know the lingo, just want to make sure they're not lost here.
Yes. So there are all these populations of all the major market classes of carrots that are really robust, diverse, and like beautiful populations to work with within Aussie. And so Irwin, we sent him some Bolero, and he crossed that Bolero with the open source nonce population. So it was strong Bolero in the parentage, but also a lot of just other nonce types. And so it definitely was not pure dehybridization, pure being in air quotes, which I think adds to the diversity, which is part of the resilience, which is part of the fun. And also, it's so fun. So within 3 generations, already Dulcinea became the name of the variety, which is kind of a nod to, Bolero and the French, like Don Quixote, kind of that nonce lineage, and with this nod toward like the sweetness, both ironically and poetically and literally within 3 generations, the flavor was way better than Bolero, so consistently. The thing that, Bolero is so good at early emergence. And so I give Dulcinea a solid B, where Dulcinea is just an A plus. Pardon me, Dulcinea is a B in emergence, where Bolero is an A plus. But in every other way, now Nathaniel is growing 5 acres of Dulcinea every year, and has for, the better part of a decade now. So it was a really, really quick, and I'm so grateful for Nathaniel's hunger. I never would have had the audacity or the courage to even think of asking that question. And it wouldn't have been possible without the joy and generosity and the genius of Irwin Goldman.
So I'm just going to walk us through a little bit just to make sure I understand how it happened. So Irwin did the initial cross with some Bolero and the nonce population, and then you took the seed and grew it out on Nathaniel's fields, and then chose the best roots out of that, and then sent them to Irwin, and then he flowered them during the winter, got seed, got them to you the next spring, and then you were able to do another generation. And so for each generation, you're always choosing the best, and it gets more what you're wanting each generation. And then I'm right up to now?
100%.
And then at that point, did you start doing the seed production at Nathaniel's or at the Fruition fields? What happened at that point?
Yeah, great question. Nathaniel, to this day, continues to grow those roots on his farm as a vegetable, as in the vegetative state. And then as soon as it was above a certain number of like 40 or 60 plants in Irwin's greenhouse, like glass houses, we and in that annual cycle of seed production for a carrot, then we went to true biennial, where Nathaniel would keep those roots in his root cellar, and then we would plant them out in spring at Fruition. and grow, the best 200-300 in one of our high tunnels. We definitely grow them in high tunnels just so there's so much the watering and like they're not getting rained on. And also we can start them that much earlier so we can get ahead of the Queen Anne's lace, which is the same genus species and readily crosses, which west of the Rockies, you don't have to worry about. There's no Queen Anne's lace, but east of the Rockies, it's a thing. And the good news is, as soon as there's a cross, those white, bitter pine soil qualities are so dominant. So it's not the worst at a super small scale, like home scale, but as a seed company, like no. But it's really clear to see, like those king umbels, those first umbels are the biggest. Secondary, tertiary, also big, and then we generally get those first 3 sets of flowers to be able to set seed before the Queen Anne's lace is flowering around us.
Are you starting them in a greenhouse, like in a small pot, and then putting them in the tunnel once they've broken dormancy, or are you planting them directly in the tunnel from the cold room?
They go from root cellar to our kitchen where we do the taste test, right to the high tunnel, right in the ground, with lots of vole traps and dogs that love to eat rodents.
How early are you planting them in the year?
It depends, but generally it's late February, early March.
Okay. And that's enough to get a head start on the Queen Anne's lace.
About a month. Yeah, which makes all the difference.
That's awesome, because we're in a similar kind of climate. We're a little bit colder than you, but we haven't grown a lot of carrots, but I'm thinking about it. Now, for the umbels, are you snipping individual umbels as they mature?
We are.
What do you look for to know that they're ready?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's the color, the texture, and also with our hands, when you brush your fingers on those seeds, if they release without any hesitation, they are ripe. And then it makes so much, in our experience, it makes a really big difference, the quality of seed to let them mature in full. And so that's where, if we have 200 carrots, it's a lot of work done still, but it's totally possible. The seed quality is so much higher if we do it all by hand. So we do.
So you cut the umbels, you spread them in a greenhouse or in a covered area?
Do.
How long do you wait before threshing them?
It so varies depending on the weather, because we live in the Northeast and we might be getting 2 weeks of rain. We might be getting 2 weeks of 90-degree plus and drought. So it's less about timing and more about, are they totally crisp? Like letting those seed heads just get utterly bone dry. So they're releasing from those umbels just with a tiny breath.
How do you thresh them?
With our feet. Yeah, it's very high tech. Even at growing hundreds of stecklings, we have basically a big blue 20-gallon tote. And in the bottom, we have it's like a mat, a plastic mat that has kind of corrugations, ridges and valleys that we step on, and then they release really beautifully. That's like just enough pressure. And it depends, right? Honestly, how we did it last year, we also were wanting to have it be a little more social. And so we were going like this between our palms and rubbing them together. So, and that really gets more of the beards off. The beards are these little lovely carrots look like little Sputniks with, like, there's the seed and then there's all these little bits of surface area that come protruding out like little hairs. And that's all well and good. If I was traveling on a rabbit, absolutely, like that's how to attach. And also if I wanted to have even more surface area, that would also create more space for humidity or bacteria to be harbored. That also is going to happen. So the quicker we can get the seed separated from the beards, they're called the carrot beards. That is an important part. And it smells so good.
You're doing that predominantly with your hands, the debearding.
Yeah. I know Matthew had another strategy when we were selling seeds and doing this in larger quantities. And here, I just want to flag that I don't remember what he was doing, and he was leading that. Bless him.
And then are you just kind of winnowing like screening and winnowing basically after that? That's the simple part?
Exactly. And Mark Lutera's brilliant winnow wizard that we are not over all these years later.
So that That is the mid-sized equipment that you did keep.
Yes, absolutely. If the barn is burning down, take the winnow wizard. Mark, if you're listening, we love you and we love your winnow wizard endlessly. And it can be quite social also, much more so than the blue dragon.
So the other crop that you wanted to talk about was a Nebraska Oreaceae cross of cabbage and collards, if I got that right.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to hear about this. So tell me why you want to talk about it and tell me about this cross.
I just love imagining all my ancestors that have evolved with Brassica oleracea, co-adapted with Brassica oleracea across the years. And I just love imagining, 6,000 years ago, the ancestor of all of these diverse Brassica oleracea, the broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, all of that, like what that common ancestor they all share that had super leathery leaves that loved and still does love to grow on the salty cliffs of Italy, and that it was vaguely edible. I'm just utterly in awe of all of our ancestors on so many levels. And so the invitation to continue playing with our food. And so I just love, many years ago, the better part of a decade ago, we crossed a purple and a green cone-headed cabbage, and they made very beautiful babies. Both the greens this vivid spectrum of light lime green to deep emerald, and the purples are this vivid spectrum of light lavender lilac to deep rich burgundies. And they're very glossy and just, they're so beautiful. And then we crossed, and this was Matthew's specific brilliance of we're so in love with this henpeck collard that our friend Heidi introduced us to. That is just like, instead of being kind of a straight, very smooth margin collard, it's called henpeck. It has all of these marvelous little serrations, kind of like a hen came in and pecked the edges of the leaf. And it's just so tender and so sweet, even in the middle of the summer. It's such a luscious vegetable. Anyone that's like, I don't think I like kale, I'm like, have you tried collards? And try henpeck, you're welcome. It tastes like kale in late November, even in August. And so we crossed this purple green cone-headed cabbage with this collard. And so that was a fun, just crossing brassicas is so fun and its own unique challenge. And then, yeah, especially crossing them across these kind of entirely different manifestations of expressions of the species.
What would you say the challenge is? Does it have to do with like timing, or what would the challenge be?
Such a great question. The challenge, first and foremost in our short seasons, is just overwintering everybody. So overwintering cabbage is not immensely hard, but you do have to have the right infrastructure and the right timing, and it doesn't just happen. So overwintering Brassica oleracea in the Northeast is, its own challenge. If they do overwinter, it's not a huge challenge, nicking it when is really challenging in corn to have it be flowering and tasseling at the same time so that you can be making that cross at the same time. Sometimes in some species like corn can be challenging. Brassica oleracea is easy in that regard because they're just tens of thousands of unapologetic flowers for weeks, sometimes for a couple of months. And so getting them to be flowering at the same time isn't hard, but then, I don't love the terminology, but they're perfect flowers. They have both the pollen giving and pollen receiving facets of the reproductive capacity within the same flower. And so going in, decide and who's going to be the parent, who's going to be the pollen giving parent, who's going to be the pollen receiving parent, and then going in and getting the pollen here from this plant in a petri dish and bringing it over in isolation, keeping them genetically isolation in time and in space distant from each other so that they can, then you bring this petri dish of pollen over and open the flower just before it actually opens so that you can remove the pollen that's about to mature and about to become vital and alive from the pollen receiving parent. And yeah, like it's so like little fun. It's a dance of going in with tweezers and again, not hard, but it doesn't just happen.
And is that because you're trying to maintain both the collard and the cabbage population as varieties that are sort of true to type? You want the cabbage seed to give cabbage seed and the collard seed to give collard seed, and just the ones that you've crossed to give the cross. Because you could just grow the cabbage beside the collard and the bees are going to do the work for you. But then if you keep the seed of each, it's going to be an unreliableness to it if you're looking for something specific.
Yes, exactly. And wanting to uplift too, I think as plant breeders, one has patience. What does Erwin Goldman say? Like that plant breeding is the slowest of the performing arts. But I confess, Matthew and I made a deliberate choice not only to maintain, like, have here the collard seed crop and here the cabbage seed crop, but we chose to make those deliberate crosses also so then we could kind of get a little farther ahead because even though brassicas are so outcrossing, they also do self pollinate. And so if we had saved all of that seed, we would have had to grow out like all of the seed to see what was happening and who it was probably going to be obvious who did make the cross, what was a cross, was a settle. But then what if we make the cross ourselves, that's 1 year less of wondering and 1 year more, pardon my scarcity mindset. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this again tomorrow, Dan. And I'm so glad that we had another year and maybe another year, maybe another decade or three. But yeah, it was really fun to. And also, we're just total plant nerds. And it was so much fun to learn and just try. And so for 2 weeks, it was a devotional morning practice of crossing these.
How many plants were you crossing each time?
Oh, great question. I'm going to say maybe 30, maybe 3 dozen.
And how successful were your crosses? Like, I've never done a manual brassica pollination. Like, did most of the pods form, or did you give them a hard time?
I am pleased to report that, yeah, in our experience, it was very successful.
When you grew them out the next year, was it a high percentage that was actually obviously crossed?
100%.
Okay. Because there is some incompatibility with brassicas too, with their, like when they're too genetically similar, sometimes they will refuse the pollen. So if you're giving them something else, they're going to be very happy.
I'm so curious. There are so many variables that we have an understanding of. There are so many other variables we have an appreciation of. And there's so many more variables than that than we have any comprehension of.
So when you grew this cross out, and how many years ago was this cross done?
I'm going to say 5.
And so what did it look like in the first couple of years? And what did you do with it?
Yeah, it was ludicrously exciting to me, but I'm also like 7 on the Enneagram. So adventure and novelty is like my love language. So I'm like, look, you're so beautiful. And every single one is, I'm a little different than my parents. Maybe you're the same. I'm different too, but I lose my mind to see the ways that plants adapt. And especially when there's that much vivid, brilliant, delicious diversity. It was so much fun to see these beings. Like, when you love two people and then they become parents and you're like, no, really, this little person. And that's how I feel about every single one of these seeds. Just utterly brilliant, utterly beautiful. When we were first even beginning to try on this identity of could we consider our plant breeders, wanted to shout out John Navazio, who was like, yes, if you save seeds, you're a plant breeder. And so when we were just being like, oh, I guess we're plant breeders. I guess we're all plant breeders. and so we were, be having, and especially because we were not quite, but invited to dehybridize Bolero and what happens next, knowing that we can't, but what happens next. And so we really wanted to, and we're trying to take ourselves seriously, like we're a seed company. And so having this uniform, very consistent Dulcinea was so vital for us. And having it be market worthy, having it not just be something that a home gardener would be like, that was fun, but for a market farmer to be like, I'm going to grow 5 acres of this instead of Bolero. that was the goal. And I love Dulcinea. And now, yeah, with this cabbage collared cross, which the cabbage, the purple and green cone headed cabbage is called Mermaid's Aurora. There were hundreds of, we also, that's another, such a fun collaboration with Nathaniel Thompson, that same farm in Trumansburg with Dulcinea, and he grows the thousands of this cabbage, purple and green cone-headed cabbage, and then we grow vegetatively, and then we grow it reproductively, which is so fun. I love that huge population size that then we can make such profound selections in, and the best of both worlds. And so they have hundreds of CSA members at this farm. And so we're doing taste tests and like showing them to people and being like, what do you think? And what would you name this vegetable? And a 6-year-old was like, mermaid's tail. And so the cabbage is called mermaid's tail. And and so we crossed it with henpeck, and yeah, the aurora borealis was incredibly present for a week while we were realizing that we were ready to share this cabbage collared cross. So we call it mermaid's aurora because it's constantly changing, just like the aurora. There's so many colors, there's so many textures. 50% of the head of the plants make what you would call a cabbage head. And 100% of the leaves are that sweet, tasty, super tender collard all summer long. So cabbage, you're like, here's the head, but all those leathery leaves, unless you're really passionate about saag paneer, you're probably not going to eat. And and so I love saag, don't get me wrong. But I love this cat. Like, here's the cabbage, and each one is like this underwater, crenulated, serrated expression of greens, purples, and like twisting spirals of leaves. And with every single one of those leaves totally scrumptious. So it does not fit into a SKU. It doesn't fit into a supermarket queue. It doesn't fit into any kind of, and the heads are going to be very diverse. Some of them are 40 days, some of them are 60 days to maturity, to harvest. And so, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of a market, but it makes a lot of sense, certainly at a smaller scale and at an adaptive scale, and as art, food as art, life as art. And if you're interested in just eating greens all summer that are epic colors and shapes, you're welcome. So it's not for everyone, but not everything is for everyone. And I'm really interested in, yeah, this, how we as climates change atmospherically, as climates change politically, as climates change culturally, um I don't know, diversity being the foundation of resilience, and how can we be weaving that into our ideas of what is food and when and why and how. um and yeah.
This definitely sounds like a brassica I would love. I just brought it up on your website as we were talking. They're beautiful. One of the roles that we have as seed stewards is that we are choosing what plants to let go to seed to the next generation. How are you guiding this population? Are you intentionally leaving heads? How are you selecting it?
We are making selections. We're making selections for the strongest color contrast, also the deepest, most unique serrations, and also for some of them are more tender than others. So making selections for that tenderness so that 100% of the leaves are like utterly luscious, and that also make big, nice heads. That's kind of the general invitation. It was really fascinating. Heron Breen, bless you, Heron, I adore you, was in the field as we were, growing 3 months after we had planted out the first generation. And we were just looking at probably 300 of these plants, and just the glorious, breath. It was like snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef was an awesome experience, and walking down this 300 row foot of brassica oleracea crosses was all out of control. And it was so fun. Heron was like, wow, what are we going to do with all this chaos? And I was like, oh, are you coming for dinner, Heron?
Are you doing like subpopulations that are going in different directions, or are you trying to keep everything in one group?
We had ambitions of sending it in different directions. And honestly, we haven't. And if someone else feels so moved, oh my goodness, that's what seeds are for. Please do.
I love hearing about the crossing, and I love hear where you're going with it. A couple practical questions. How are you overwintering plants? Are you overwintering them in the field? Are you digging them up? You putting them in the greenhouse? What are you doing?
We bring them into essentially a cooler, a great big, like that we would store, carrots and other root vegetables in. So we bring them into a great big, like a 5x5 wooden tote, but it could be much smaller. And we cut the heads off so we can have our cabbage and eat it too, have our cake and eat it too. And so it's just this beheaded cabbage with all the auxiliary boughs, right? And buried in, and the root ball is we keep as much soil on it as we can, and bury it in essentially potting mix with lots of extra peat or deciduous leaves, depends on the year, but something that where that root ball is going to be 100% humid, and it's going to be at like 34 35 degrees, and we harvest them after frost, but not before it's really like damaging frost. And so we're wanting to harvest them, the cabbages, when we like, we'll put a flag in to the plants before we harvest the heads for cabbage so that we know which plants we're going to lift and put into the root cellar. And then, we're letting that heal over in the field and like go into dormancy in the field. So the plant is already like concentrating its life force deep within itself by the time we're moving it. So when we're growing brassica oleracea for seed, we're sowing them in August and harvesting those plants usually in October.
And how many plants are you bringing in? And how many plants are you expecting to get to the next year? Like, how much loss do you plan on?
I am going to give us a ballpark of like 50 to 60 are going into the winter, and we'll plant out 30, 40.
And then how early are you planting them? And are you planting them directly in the field, or do you plant them in a greenhouse?
Depends. Yeah, some we do in the field, some we do in the high tunnels.
Is that like an isolation kind of thing?
Isolation, and also, yeah, just it depends if there's like other things that really can't hack it in anywhere else but the tunnel. We'll give them the tunnel space, but if we can, we'll get more seed in the tunnel for sure. And generally, it's easy. The harvest window is a little more flexible, so they don't burst as quickly.
Maybe one last question about the harvest part. When you harvest them and you cut the head off, like, so you're cutting the head kind of like really flush with the top of the stem, so because you want those growing points to be there.
Yes. Yeah. And we try to do that in a weather window where there will be several warm-ish, but certainly dry days in fall, so that there's the most chance of it actually healing over, and not rotting.
So like after that point, it's basically a brassica, right? And so you're going to harvest it and treat it like a brassica. Is there anything that you want to share with folks specifically about the harvesting, the threshing, any of those things that you think that people should know?
It never gets old. They're so satisfying. We generally harvest, once there's like 60-70% of the seeds are mature, and then bring them into dry again on those. Our spring propagation greenhouse turns into seed drying all summer, all fall. And so we'll give them, it could be 2 days, it could be longer, depending on the weather, until they're like crispy dry. And we love, I forget what it's called. I mean, we have a spiral seed separator. I feel like there's another fun name, but that's also another tool that we kept because it's just endlessly entertaining as well as effective and can be totally social. I don't know.
So you're running them through the spiral separator. And so for folks who don't know that, there's kind of like two tracts, and like the spherical seeds, like a kale seed or I guess a collard or a cabbage seed, gains momentum and then jumps out of one track and then falls in the other. And you can separate the spherical from things that aren't seed or maybe some that have split. So that's what a spiral separated would do. That brings us to the end of the brassica, I guess. This would be the beginning then of our wrap-up question. So Petra, what would you tell your younger seed-growing self?
I would encourage myself to not put myself in boxes or anyone else or seeds, and to not judge anyone else for how they are living, how they are engaging with seed. To not judge myself, how I'm engaging, but especially it's so easy to judge other people. And that it's really easy for communication and relationships to fray, especially around those hard edges that we can sometimes find ourselves in, whether it's, the ideological, ideological. There's so much that I wish I could have had a lighter touch. And there's so many, someday we can talk about, oh my gosh, Petra and hybrids. There's so many ways that seeds have just continually broken open my ideas that I thought were really expansive, but were really small, turns out. And that's okay. The seeds have everything they need to keep growing. And so, continually shedding these seed coats. And I've been really humbled how beautiful so many of our relationships within seed world are, and also how easily some of them have crumbled in some really tender ways, and crumbled, eroded, and wanting us all, wanting my younger self, wanting myself right now to just not be as attached to what I think I know.
What would you say to market growers to inspire them to start growing seed?
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. You might need some friends. It's really hard to do anything alone. And so having another friend or two, whether they're market farmers or certainly if you're in Western New York in the Finger Lakes, let us know. We love collaborating with farmers. And so it can be really helpful. We have bridge people and bridge times. It can be so helpful to have a friend who will grow the seeds, and especially for biennials and other crops, that there's the vegetative part of a life cycle and the reproductive part of a life cycle, and that's totally valid. But otherwise, oh my gosh, what is the seed that you are most interested in adapting on your farm? And maybe there's also scarcity around, and very real limitation around what seed is available, when and why and how, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's conventional versus organic, whether you're feeling aware of, that seed companies are constantly changing their offerings, especially for hybrids. And we've had some really fun projects that have emerged from farmers being brokenhearted that their beloved varieties are going to be discontinued, and then what next? What do you love, and let the soft animal of your body love what it loves, as Mary Oliver says. And also, you're doing enough. You're doing enough. You're probably doing too much, just like the rest of us. And where's the meaning in magic? And who are your friends who can make even more meaningful magic with you?
Is there something that I should have asked you?
Well, I think the only thing that you could ask me is, when are the next Olympics that I can come to, Dan?
So for folks who don't know, that's the Farm Olympics that we host every now and then on our farm. It's been a few years since we had them, but Petra and Matthew came up to represent Fruition, and you did fantastic.
USA. USA. That's all I can think of, Dan, and I can't wait till next time.
We'll keep you posted, Petra.
Oh, can I tell you one more thing?
Definitely.
I know you're a big fan of Octavia Butler. Did you see we named a new glossy purple snow pea New Suns for Octavia?
I did not know that. I should check it out.
There's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns.
Do you want to tell us about this pea? A little bit of the genesis of it?
Well, it's a purple glossy snow pea, and it came from some mixes. Michael Mazurek, beloved mentor at Cornell, And he had a number of different peas that he was, he's a pea breeder among many other delights. And it was in probably 4 generations of crosses and selections in our fields, there was this one plant that was super purple and utterly glossy, like dipped in lacquer, utterly like, what is going on? Luminescent. So we saved seed from that one plant and have been increasing it for a few years. So it's this really sweet, let the peas inside swell, and like it's so bright green peas inside a deep lacquered silvery, just bright glossy purple pod. And yeah, I love Octavia's line of "There's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns." And so we call this pea New Suns for Octavia.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. And what I also love about the story is how you just told us 2 stories of very intentional plant breeding, where you were getting brassica pollen and bringing it somewhere else, and they did 2 wonderful outcomes. But now you've also just told us a story of accidental plant breeding that you weren't expecting. And sure, there's work that happened beforehand, but there's work in all the vegetables and varieties that we grow. That's there. And so I love it.
The accidental plant breeder. Hi, my name is Petra.
So how can people find out more about what you're doing?
Certainly, you'll always find fruitionseeds.com. We send out a mostly weekly email that's a love letter to seeds, the people who sow them, and stories of gift culture here on the farm and well beyond. And so certainly we would love, honestly, our email is the most vivid way that we are engaging in digital communications. You'll find us on Instagram and Facebook too, though I confess I spend a lot less time in those spaces these days. And you'll always find us on the farm as well. Here in Western New York, your plate is waiting. Come hungry, bring your toothbrush, stay the weekend. We look so forward to welcoming anyone who wants to talk seeds and gift culture, especially.
Well, that's quite the invitation. So send it going out to listeners across the world. So thank you so much, Petra, for coming on.
Thank you for the invitation. We love you, Dan.
I love both of you too. So have a fantastic growing season.
Thank you. You too. Here's to all the seeds yet to come.
And that's episode 69 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. Thank you, Petra, for being on the podcast. It was fun to catch up, and I've got to grow some of that Mermaid's Aurora. I love a beautiful brassica cross. Thank you to Safia Sidelton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at safiasidelton.com. Thank you to Molly Breezebois for editing this episode. And thank you so much for joining me in these conversations with seed farmers. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. And you can support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast, or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.